Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is April 3rd, 2024, and we have got a great show for you today. This is the last romance author that we have for our Love Fest for the season opener of Season 3 of Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart, the Book Talk podcast. We had originally planned to have her in the regular lineup, but due to circumstances beyond our control, we had to reschedule, and luckily we were still able to get her in at the end before we start our regular shows up again. So here we have today our last romance author. You're going to love what she has to say. Now be sure to stick around to the very end because we have announcements again, as always, and there's some really good things coming up and you'll want to know about them. So without further ado, please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart, Khushi T. Saha. Thank you so much for joining me today. And as always, we will start out with you telling our listeners who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Dianne. My name is Khushi T. Saha, and I am an interracial romance author. And I write interracial contemporary romances that focus on the South Asian experience in the West. So I myself am first generation. My parents are from Bangladesh, and some of the experiences that I had growing up trying to figure myself out, as well as, juggling two cultures and then trying to date in a different country with different cultures all melded together was something that was a struggle for me. And I felt like there wasn't enough of that in the romance genre. So that's kind of where it all started in a way. And yeah, I find that the space is growing, but I really continue writing my stories in there because I have a lot to say.
And that's one thing that we've actually been focusing on a lot the last, probably like year and a half here is representation. Mm-hmm. Because representation is so important. We need to have fiction that illustrates the people who are in the world around us.
Exactly.
That just makes the world so much more rich.
It does. It does. And I do feel as though fiction is in an umbrella genre, if you will, has a lot going on in terms of some of these bigger fiction authors like Jhumpa Lahiri and whatnot. But when it came to romance and just spicy romance, TV romance, it was hard to find. And I think authors might have felt the same way I did, wondering if cultures that are a little bit more closed off in speaking about sexuality, would readers even want to read it? And readers want to read it, might be anonymous, but they do want to see that. So they want to see themselves represented.
Well, and I would think it would be, especially in those cultures where it's not spoken about very much, people would be more likely to pick up a book because they can do that at home, in private.
Privacy, yep, exactly.
What are the book series that you have?
My first series is called the Liberated series, and that came out, I would say, back around 2022. And that has 2 books and a happily ever after epilogue. And my second duet, which is truly a duet, has 2 books, is the Unraveled duet. That came out last year. The first series basically came out of something, it was personal. I just started writing because I was going through a personal experience and I kept having these very vivid dreams. I've heard of some authors who say they dream vividly, and I didn't think that was anything, but then I realized that there are actual stories and narratives that are going on in my head. So I wanted to write it down. And then it just became a story and it became a romance. It had to do with an Indian woman who came to the U.S. as a young girl and continued growing up in the U.S., but still dealt with the differences in cultures, and then how she fell in love with a white man and how he had to deal with her personal life, what her family's expectations were of her. So that's where that first series came from. And it just kind of bloomed into that. And I wasn't an author before that. I wasn't doing any kind of writing. And I thought, let me just see if I can find an editor online. And then I did. And luckily I found somebody who looked at what I had and I thought it was complete garbage. But she looked at it and she said, there's so much here. She's like, are you sure you haven't written before? I mean, your imagery, you've got some amazing stuff here. And, I dabbled when I was younger. I think a lot of people did at some point, but, not really. And the other side of me, my other professional side, quote unquote, my day job is more creative, hands-on. So that's kind of where I felt like a lot of my emotions came out in, but I didn't realize that there was more stuck in there that was coming out via words. So she was kind enough to work with me and help me format things and edit things in the way it should be done and talk about the romance genre and what people, what readers are looking for. And even she at the time said the South Asian lens is growing and is becoming bigger in mainstream. And it was, with Bridgerton and all that jazz and Bollywood, it's like things are coming to us more. Mindy Kaling, like just more is coming and we hear more and are exposed more and it's natural now. But in that time, just a few years ago, it was starting to explode. And so she encouraged me. She's like, I think you should keep going with this. So that's how that came about. And that story I finished, but then the next story was already percolating. And actually, my niece is my inspiration for the next story. Not that my niece is a grown woman experiencing these things, but she is half white and half South Asian. And that was the experience that I wanted to represent, was you're dealing with two kinds of families in a way, and how do you split yourself between two sorts of expectations and finding yourself in that realm.
Even if you weren't doing a lot of writing before you did your first book and went to this editor, were you an avid reader?
Oh, yeah. In fact, growing up, my siblings and I were all huge readers. And I remember my mother would get mad because she wasn't a huge, like, I don't know how you sit down and just read. She looks at a page and then she closes it. It reminds me of that scene in, I think it's the BBC Pride and Prejudice from the 90s, which is my favorite version, with Jennifer L. and Colin Firth, where Miss Bingley is reading a book and trying to read a book the way that everybody else is, but then she just snaps it closed after a minute because she's like, I don't know what's happening here. That's how my mother was with reading. And she would get angry that we would want to just read on the weekends for hours in bed sometimes. I mean, but it was just such an escape. And yes, like, absolutely. I read, I'm a huge reader. I am a library member. I buy books. I do everything. So I do it all. I've always got at least 2 or 3 books on the nightstand. I'm reading more than one book at one time.
Oh, yeah. I'm bad about that too. It's like I can never remember. It's like, which book was I reading last night? Okay.
That's funny because I was recently reading 2 books and I finished them, but I was getting the storylines confused because there were some similar characters. And I was like, wait a minute, that didn't happen in that book. That happened in this book.
You know what I've started doing? I'll read like one nonfiction and one fiction. That way it's really easy to keep them apart because I've been reading this book by one of the women who helped put together the behavioral science unit for the FBI.
Oh,
and her history as a criminal profiler.
Wow.
And the other one is by J.R. Ward, one of the Black Dagger Brotherhood books.
Okay.
Really easy to keep those two apart.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Since you had an editor, did you go traditionally published or are you still indie published?
I'm still indie published, yeah. I mean, I did send my manuscript out and letters to a few publishing houses, but after a while, not even a while, I didn't give it more than like 3 or 4 months doing that. At the same time, I decided to go ahead and publish it as an indie author because I wanted to get it out there. And I knew that there were other South Asian women who had experienced what I experienced and probably wanted to see it represented out there too. So I went backwards with it in that I went ahead and published it with Amazon, but I hadn't done any marketing for it. Mm-hmm. So, once it was out there, it was kind of like I kept hearing crickets. It was like nothing was happening.
Yeah.
So then I realized, oh man, I do have to get on social media and do all the stuff. And I'm already doing that with my other job because it's a business that I created and I'm successful with it. And that's fine. That's all part of it. I didn't want to have to do that with this too.
Yeah.
But, you do as an indie author, And I think even as a traditional author nowadays, I mean, you
Oh,
have
yeah.
to go there and just make the connections, find out what's happening in the industry. And it is overwhelming. Absolutely is overwhelming. All the different types and formats. And, I finally jumped on TikTok after doing Instagram and Facebook, but I'm not doing threads, but that might
Mhm.
change.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I actually worked in advertising for like 20 some years, and the advertising part of my own books is still like the worst part of my experience.
I don't blame you because I worked in marketing. I did corporate marketing for a while before I started my own business. And yeah, it's kind of like you know what needs to happen, but you also know the steps and how much time and work is involved in that.
Mhm. And when you're not getting paid directly to do it,
Yeah, right?
it
Yeah,
makes it harder to do.
yeah. And there's a reason why you got out of that industry in the first place.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
you're like, oh, I have to do it again. But it means something else, right? It's your product, but
Mhm.
still, you know what goes into it.
Now, do you think being indie published, it makes it so much easier for you to actually bring the story that you want to your audience?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I tell myself every day when I look at the cost that I'm eating for
Yeah.
editing and cover designs and all that jazz. Because if I did work with a traditional publisher, which I don't know if I'm good enough for that, so just keep that in mind. But if that ever happened, they would have a lot of say in what the story looked like.
Hmm.
And there could be moments where they're like, this doesn't go great with the plot. Whereas in my head, it's like, well, that really happened to me. And I really want people to know about that.
Hmm.
That was the real reaction. So absolutely, I feel way more freedom in writing the story I want to write as an indie author.
Well, I've talked to a few traditionally published authors who have come back and said, I finally got this book deal. I was so happy. Then they didn't like my cover ideas. They didn't like my title. They changed it to something I did not want. But if I wanted the publication deal, I had to agree to this change.
Right.
And I'm just like such a control freak. I could not
Mhm.
stand to do that. I cannot have them come in and change everything that I'm trying to do. I would
Yeah.
much rather keep doing everything indie published and have the product I want.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, and this is what my husband says to me. He's like, remember, this is a very expensive hobby for you. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it is. I mean, the dollars are coming in more every year,
Hmm.
but it's not like we can live off of it completely. But it just feels nice to, yes, get my creativity out there the way I want it. Exactly what you're saying. And I'm a control freak too. I'm even with my PA, I'm getting her advice on my next cover design from the designer I'm working with, who's amazing. I love her. And she comes up with these great ideas and can totally create what my vision is. And my PA, I love her opinion because obviously she works with many types of authors and has been in the industry for a while and she has a marketing background. And what she tells me, I cringe. It's like, I don't know if I want to do that. So it's a fine line still of like being authentic, but trying to market it as well as an indie author so that people are still interested in you. But I totally understand that. I want it my way or the highway.
Well, and one of the things we talk about a lot, especially with indie authors, is cover design. And you have got some great covers.
Oh, thank you. I had to put some visual elements of the South Asian culture in there. I mean, yeah, but
Well,
thank you.
they definitely grab your attention. You can tell that the books are part of a series.
Mhm. Yeah,
And there's something that you would not be embarrassed to carry on a subway with you.
that is what I'm the challenge I'm having with this next cover because that feels authentically me is to be like I want to be able to read this on the subway,
Hmm.
and people will be like, oh, well, it's obviously a romance, but maybe it's not super, cheesy and steamy. But the next cover design, I have options where the male has no shirt on. And
Hmm.
I just don't know how I feel about that. I know people love it. You're
Yeah.
reading your on a Kindle, that's one thing. But if you've got the physical copy, then that's another thing.
And some people, even though they love reading romance novels, they don't want people to know that they read romance
Yeah,
novels.
yeah, exactly. It's still a hush hush, keep it a secret kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is sad because I think people should be happy that they're reading something that they enjoy and just to heck with everybody else. Don't worry about it.
Agree. And romance is a well-respected genre. I mean, if I'm speaking to someone and I tell them that I write on the side and this is the genre, and they kind of giggle, it's like, are we really there still? I
Yeah.
mean, there are writers out there, indie and traditionally published, who really hone their craft.
Hmm.
They're going to writing conferences and they're researching and really understanding their subject matter. And some that have serious subject matter more than maybe say than what I'm writing even. So, and that's a lot of the feedback I get from readers is I learned so much when I read this book. I knew nothing about the intricacies of South Asian culture. Of course, I know about the glitz and glams of Bollywood, but I didn't know that this is what women face. I didn't know that this is what men face. So that's what I want. I want to just teach people, but through a storyline that has a happily ever after, say, and some spicy scenes in it. So, but yeah, I mean, the level of time it takes, just say for me, and I know that people do this as a full-time job, that they take with their craft is nothing to laugh about.
Well, and
So,
besides that, the thing that always amazes me, the romance genre is the biggest selling money
right,
making genre in publishing.
right. It is, and it has been for a while.
So, there are people out there reading these. So,
Yeah,
and the vast majority of people have to be reading them to make it this big of a seller. So, I
exactly.
think the more people say, oh, yeah, I read romance. Oh, really? Who do you read? And they will find that they have a lot in common with a lot of people around them if they would
Yes.
just be honest about it and like don't
Yeah.
have any shame about reading romance. And the thing is,
Right.
within romance, you can have every other genre out there. You can have a sci-fi romance. You can have a
Yeah.
horror romance. You
Right.
can have,
Fantasy, crime,
yeah.
thriller, like it all goes in there. You're right. Yeah.
So I think
Mystery.
people need to just start relaxing about it. It's a
Yeah.
it's a worthwhile genre.
I mean, I will say this. There was recently an interview. I can't remember what TV program it was. It was a national show. And they were interviewing one of the owners of the Ripped Bodice, which is in Brooklyn, which is a
Mhm.
romance bookstore, which is awesome. All these stores popping up like that. It's amazing. But I think what really annoyed me was the fact that their headline was something like, let yourself have that guilty pleasure with romances. And is that really a guilty pleasure? I mean, I think reading in general in this world, you could see as a guilty pleasure if you're
Yeah.
not doing something else more productive. People won't be like, oh, why are you reading? You should be doing something.
Yeah.
But also, what if you're reading crime, like really violent crime? Isn't that considered a guilty pleasure too? I mean,
Yeah.
I loved that they were showcasing romance, but I hated that. That really irked me.
Well, and that kind of just insinuates that there's a stigma to reading it because you're
Hmm.
guilty. You're guilty of enjoying it.
Right,
Like,
right.
no, it's just
But
a
so,
pleasure.
and you wonder why, then why don't romance movies or romantic comedies get that in theaters or
Hmm.
movies? Why don't you get that same stigma? Why
Yeah.
is that okay? So, yeah. Well, hopefully things are not as stigmatized as people become more open about this.
Well, whenever you start considering a lot of the more personal aspects of life that are starting to be discussed openly now, hopefully
Yeah.
people are starting to come out and realize that, human beings are complex. They have a lot of likes and dislikes. They have baggage. They have all kinds of things. And hopefully the world is coming around a little bit.
Yes, hopefully.
So now, whenever you get your story idea, what is your process? Do you plot? Are you a pantser? How do you get your story on the page?
Little bit of both. I definitely type up a plot line and I follow a structure that actually my editor had given me a few structures that she's like, whatever works for you, if you want to plot it out, that I kind of use. And then they're just general ideas of, say, the first quarter of the book, the second quarter of the book, as I keep going, like what
Hmm.
is the dark moment, things like that, moment of conflict, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So that's how I usually do it. And I haven't really done it with this third, I wouldn't say series, but I mean, the first two were series, but I guess that I don't, if I count how many books I've done, one, two, three, the sixth book, I guess. I haven't really done that with this. I did kind of plot it out, and then I liked the plot line, and so did my editor, and I started writing it, and then it just started, like, it fell. The story didn't really jive, and there were some plot holes, and so then I went back and fixed it again, and then I went back and fixed it again. So
Yeah.
it's taking a couple of revisions to get it right. And it's even, I've kind of like thrown the plot structure out the window, and I'm pantsing now. So that's where it's going. And I think my editor is aware of what's happened in my personal life with the death in a family and stuff. So she herself was like, take your time. I totally understand. She's like, we'll work through this. We'll work through the holes. So she's like, this definitely feels different from your others. This one is more of a slow burn. The others kind of start with the physical right off the bat. She's like, this is a different direction, and we'll go slow.
Now, whenever you start a new story idea, do you have in mind, okay, I want it to be like this trope? We're going to follow enemies to friends or whatever.
Yes.
Do you have this idea when you're starting?
I do. I do.
And what are your favorite tropes to use?
My favorite, definitely Second Chance.
Mm-hmm.
I love how the characters go through something have already been through something, and they have to work through their struggles. They realize they're still in love with the other person or have feelings or still attracted, and they have to work through overcoming that or just succumbing to that. And what that looks like personally, in your head, what decisions do you need to, or they need to overcome in order to be with that person, or let go in order to be with that person. And then, of course, I throw in, outside conflicts as well, like family and a jealous ex-boyfriend or something, just because it's fun. But yeah, yes, I walk in and with knowing what trope I want, and I do like second chance romance for sure. But this one right now is a grumpy sunshine, which is kind of fun as well.
Do you fall in with the group that believes that all romance should always have a happily ever after?
I do. I do. Because everything is so gray, with the newer concepts of like a third act breakup and blah, blah, blah. This is like black and white, doesn't have a happily ever after. It's not romance. And where would I market it? I guess I would market it under women's fiction or.
Yeah, there tends to be a lot that sort of go that way of just women's fiction whenever it doesn't have that happily ever after ending.
Yeah. And, just being part of, again, the social media groups, I'm also part of reading groups for romance. And those readers are very, very strict about needing that happily ever after. They don't care what happens in the story. So if I'm trying to get them to read it, then they need that happily ever after for sure.
I think that's part of whenever you pick up a book to just read for pleasure and escapism, you don't want a horrible ending because life has too many of its own horrible endings. You want that guarantee of everything's going to be okay in the end.
And I will give that to you if you read my book.
Now, I know you are scheduled to be at Steamy LitCom in California in August. What are you going to be doing there?
I'll have a table with my books. I'll get to, talk to other readers who come by and want to learn more about what I'm writing, and just basically socializing. If you want to buy some of my books or pre-order some of my books, you can. Yeah. And I'm excited to meet other authors who obviously write steamy romances, but, also those who write interracial romances the way I do, or, that kind of thing. And then attending a few panels just to hear what other authors are talking about and how they create their craft and work through their issues.
Have you been to other cons before? Is this your first one?
This is my first one. And this one really spoke to me because, first of all, it was newer. And I thought, okay, I can do this. I'm a new author too, and it won't be that big. But it's ginormous. It started last year, and it was such a hit that I applied this year because I like the idea. So Steamy LitCon really surrounds around the idea of representation in romance. So it is a lot of authors of color or the gay lesbian genre and just not necessarily your traditional romance. So I thought, okay, this is great. I would love to represent here. And they loved what I had to offer too. So they wanted me to come. But I found out that tickets sold out in like 2 hours when
Wow.
this next season. Yeah, this next conference. And I'm a little scared about that. So it's bigger than I thought it was going to be.
That could be amazing, though.
It'll be amazing. It'll be fun. I've heard that it's such an experience, a great experience. But that's really the one big thing that I'm doing this year because indie author, small budget. So, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a great way to connect with a lot of readers in a short amount of time.
Right.
And it should really be able to boost your visibility that way because you always have to imagine every person you talk to will probably tell 10 other people about you.
Right.
So now, are you gearing up with any good author swag that you're going to take with you?
I can't tell you that. No, yes, I am. Yeah. I mean, the typical bookmarks and stickers, of course, but I'm looking into possibly doing temporary tattoos, giving out Indian treats. So just to make it a little bit different. Yeah. Thinking about doing like a giveaway. So a couple of ideas are percolating and I'm starting to write them down. So they're sort of becoming concrete. And by March, they have to be concrete. So I have to start making it happen. So
now how is your mailing list? Do you have a fairly large mailing list for your newsletter?
I do. I have a little over 1,000 people on my mailing list.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking if you had like a little box there that people could put their information in for getting onto your newsletter.
Yes. Oh, I will have that for sure.
Yeah, that would be amazing. You would probably get a lot of additions to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So now this is the part of the show where we like to do 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick because we usually end up talking about each one too much, but we're going to keep doing it. So are you ready?
Yes.
Question 1. Who is your favorite romance author to read?
Oh my goodness.
Or if you can't pick a favorite, the last one you read.
Well, I will say that I mean, I'll pick a favorite. I do love reading T.L. Swan. Okay. She is not an indie author. Well, maybe she is. She maybe started as one. But her books are her stories are so toxic. Okay. And they're like, I just get sucked into the personalities and like the anger and the emotions. And she does a great job with her. Steamy scenes are amazing. I really do like reading her, even though I say, she's coming out with another book. I want to come out with another book. But then I read it and I'm like, this is amazing. She's one of my favorites for sure.
Say that's a very good endorsement. Question 2. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Strawberry.
Oh, good choice.
Yeah.
So it seems like most people either go for something with a lot of stuff in it, like Rocky Road.
No, I can't do that.
Yeah. Or it's like a vanilla chocolate thing.
Cookies and cream is a close second.
See, for me, I'm like so boring. My favorite one is vanilla bean ice cream.
I don't think that's boring. I think that you just like the classic simple flavor. You don't like all the junk in it.
See, but it can't be just plain vanilla. It has to be vanilla bean with the little bits in there. It has to be that one specifically.
No, I absolutely. If it was plain vanilla, then that would be really plain.
Yeah. They got to have some little special to it.
A little depth to it, yeah.
Question 3. Scary movies, fan or not a fan?
I am not a fan. If I watch a scary movie, I have to have a pillow with me because I have to hide my face.
Question 4. What do you have more of in your garden? Flowers or edibles? I mean, food like herbs or vegetables.
Sure. I think it's half and half. I do the flowers and my husband does the edible gardening in terms of tomatoes and herbs and green beans and all that jazz. I mean, now it's nothing because it's cold here.
I wanted to specify because there are a lot of flowers that you can eat.
Oh, that's true too. But I do not do edible flowers, no.
Question 5. What is your favorite podcast? And of course, I do not expect you to say this one, other than mine.
Aside from
What
this
is your favorite
one,
podcast?
I am a big Crime Junkie podcast listener,
Mm-hmm.
and that is what it's called, Crime Junkies.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And it's these two women in Indiana who are huge crime people. And they started this podcast a few years ago, and it has grown because a lot of people obviously like to listen to crime.
Yeah.
But it's really helped the communities that, let's say that there's a mystery crime, what somebody was abducted or whatnot. They've actually helped solve a few crimes. So
Oh, wow.
people listening are like, oh, wait a minute, I think I remember that and I may have seen that. It gets the conversation going. So in that by itself, I support them, but I just like their storytelling format. And they're just normal women. They're both mothers. They're young entrepreneurs. And I like that podcast. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I actually have an author coming up that you would probably like because he is actually an investigator and his book is about a true crime that he wrote about.
Oh,
so
you're going to have to think about that.
Yeah. Now, tell everybody again, what books do you write and where can they find you?
I will say that you can find me on Amazon, and I'm also on Kindle Unlimited. And my series, I have the Liberated series. That includes book 1, Passion's Liberation, book 2, Love's Liberation, and an epilogue called Liberated Ever After. And then I have a duet series called the Unraveled Duet series. And the first book is Desires Unraveling, and the second book is Hearts Unraveled. And if you want more information, you can also just hop on my website, which is www.ktsromance.com. And you can find all the information and links to purchase on there.
And as always, all of the active links to your social media and your Amazon accounts will be in the description of today's podcast and on our website. And you will be in the April-May issue of Book Banter magazine as well.
Yay! I'm so excited.
And there will be live links in that.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for being here today. It has been so fantastic getting to talk to you about all of this.
Thank you so much, Diane. It's been fun.
So there you have it, folks. My interview with the incredible romance author, Khushi T. Saha. Be sure to go check out all of her published works on her website, which you can find the link in the description of today's podcast and on our website at burkhartbooks.com/podcast. Now, coming up, we have got some incredible authors for the next few weeks. We have science fiction. We have epic fantasy. We even have historical fiction espionage, which is based on a true story. We have got family drama. We have got thrillers. We have even got an expert on cybersecurity. There are so many amazing things coming up. You do not want to miss out. And don't forget to go to burkhartbooks.com and check out the latest issue of Book Banter magazine, on sale now for $2.99. We have changed the format, so now you can download a copy and keep it for yourself. This issue details all of the authors that are going to be coming up in the next 2 months with links to their social media and buy links for all of their books. So there you have it. There's the latest things going on. We've got so many great things coming up. Please subscribe to this podcast because if you love books like we do, you do not want to miss a single episode. Now it's time for you all to go forth and be so very happy.